Hello, this is My Rural Dan with AWS Educate. And thank you for joining the Supporting the Rapid Transition to Remote Learning webinar series from Amazon Web Services. Educators all over the world are rapidly transitioning to remote learning, some for the first time. And we wanted to do something to ease the transition. This webinar was created for educators by educators who have expertise in remote learning and can share their insights with you. The series runs through May 1st, so check back on the website each Monday to view new webinar topics. You will be muted during this webinar, but we want to hear from you, so please put your questions in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. We will answer questions throughout the presentation and also have time set aside at the end to answer questions. Note that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording one day after the webinar. You will also receive a certificate for attending this webinar. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Susan Fenton of the University of Texas Health Science Center School of Biomedical Informatics to discuss the application of academic integrity policies in an online environment. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Fenton.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joined us here today. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. So for application of academic integrity policies in an online environment, let's first take a look at our agenda. So I'm going to do a little bit of introduction about academic integrity, talk about methods and tools, talk about training and experiences that we've had with training as well as technical support, talk about how we handle noncompliance in the online environment. It does happen. Important lessons that we've learned at my school, and then we'll be happy to take some questions. So just a little bit about myself. I am currently the Associate Dean for Academic and Curricular Affairs at the School of Biomedical Informatics. It is a graduate school only. I've served in this role for nearly 7 years, with 70% of our courses offered online. So we have significant experience in the online mode of delivery as well as dealing with academic integrity issues. And I'd encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions after this session. So first I'm going to talk about methods and tools, and we're specifically going to discuss student identity verification, proctoring, your options for that, as well as plagiarism prevention. And we're going to unpack each of these a little bit. So student identity verification. If you read through your regional accreditor, and we all have regional accreditors, they do require a secure login and password, obviously, that your assessments be proctored, and that you verify student identity prior to enrollment and before online assessments, and you can do that in a variety of ways. Our best practice that we have implemented at the School of Biomedical Informatics is we have a background check conducted with identity verification prior to student enrollment. Typically, this costs less than $50 for each student. For those of you who are just moving into this area, it might be an issue as you are trying to ensure students are completing their own work. It could be more important if mandatory online education extends to fall of 2020. When our regional accreditor mandated proctoring for all assessments, we figured it was just a matter of time until we would need to verify student identity upon enrollment.
So Susan, we have a question on this student verification process. So do you really think it's necessary to verify a student's identity before enrollment? Like, what are the benefits?
Well, so for us, which with 70% of our education online, we have students who will actually never set foot on our campus. So we will never see them. They will never be issued a student ID. So how else are we going to be sure that when they're presenting their ID in a proctored assessment, which I'm about to talk about a little bit, that they are indeed the person who should be taking that assessment. I can see where it would be, many of us don't think like this, but some people do, where someone might hire someone to go earn a degree for them. And so from the beginning to the end, you would have somebody who was impersonating another person. And so we just want to make sure that the person we admit, the person we enroll, and the person who's taking all of the assessments is that same person. So yes, I do think it's important, especially if you're never going to see the student on campus.
Yeah, that's super interesting, especially with the current situation. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So methods and tools for proctoring. At UTHealth, where I work, proctoring is required for all grade generating assessments. So it doesn't matter how important the assessment is, how many points are generated by the assessment. If it is going to contribute to the student's grade, it must be proctored. What we've discovered from that mandate at our institution is that there are many, many different methods and tools that are available. Some of the considerations that we have used for selecting the right proctoring solution include, does it integrate with your learning management system? If you were to choose a proctoring solution that did not integrate with your learning management system, that's one more place for your faculty to go to have to handle assessments. We would receive pushback on that. Our faculty would push back for us on that. We looked at the payment model. So lump sum or per assessment attempt. Also, is the cost to the institution or the cost to the student? So there are some solutions where you have to schedule a certain amount of time in advance. And if you don't meet that scheduling requirement, which is the next bullet here, then you have to pay additional money. So those are all things to look at, right? Your payment, your scheduling. We have students who often will be taking their exams at night, and by at night I mean like by 11 midnight. So we want online and phone support available 24/7, 365, so that we don't have to pay to have someone like that standing by just in case they have problems. You would want to look at the technology that they're using to support it. And typically what you see is are they recording the assessment attempt, whether it's a quiz or an exam or whatever it is, or do they have a person on the other end who's watching the student take that assessment? So the cloud recorded AI is more recent versus the traditional where they have a person on the other end. And then you're also interested in flexibility in assessment setup. We do closed book assessments and open book assessments. Many people now have multiple monitors. Can you lock them down to one monitor? Can you lock them down to a particular browser window? What happens if they try to navigate away from that browser window? In our instance, it automatically submits the quiz or the exam. Can you set it up for multiple attempts versus single attempts? And how long can a particular assessment be? So in graduate school, some of our exams will take 3 or 4 or even longer hours. And can your proctoring solution handle that? Typical tools that you might include or that I've seen out there are RHIA, ProctorU, ExamSoft, Top Hat, HonorLock, Respondus, Monitor, and others. In terms of the payment or considerations for my institution, our faculty are not going to use anything that's not convenient. For the payment, we charge a technology fee for our online students, so we pay out of that. So we pay a lump sum per year for our proctoring solution. And Because our average student is a working adult, we prefer an on-demand solution, because otherwise the student has to schedule it a certain number of days in advance, and many of our students are working adults, so we didn't want to have to put that extra burden on them. We also wanted full technical support and a tool that allowed for ultimate flexibility. So those are things that were very important to us, but each institution is very different. We, of course, also have an issue with plagiarism, and that's not something that's unique to the online environment, right? That's something that you have whether you're teaching in person or online. We do use plagiarism prevention for any written assessment that's more than 1,000 words. We reserve the right to use it for any written assessment. So for assignments, for papers, essays, presentations, we also use it for discussion forum submissions. So in the online environment, you use discussion forums a lot for your student engagement. We have had students copy and paste into discussion forums. Again, your considerations for that: how well does it integrate with your learning management system? Can you get quick results and meaningful reports for both the students and the faculty? And we'll talk about, for training and technical support, we do allow students to have access to this prior to turning in the written assessment. And again, your flexibility and setup. So for example, if they're submitting it multiple times, how does the software handle that? Typical tools that you see for that are DupliChecker, CopyLeaks, PaperRater, Turnitin, Grammarly, and again, there are others. Each institution needs to choose for itself.
So we have a quick question. So, and it's more of a comment. So it seems that plagiarism is an issue no matter whether it's in person or online. Do you think that there's going to be an increased case of students getting more creative with an online environment?
So for plagiarism, it's actually interesting. If you have a good plagiarism checker, it can be difficult for the student to argue about the results, right? To argue about the similarity rating, because it is what it is. And the plagiarism checkers will highlight what they've found that's duplicated, and they'll point you to the source of where that came from. So very, very difficult for students to argue with it. I think the issue with plagiarism checkers is that they have to be used. So whatever your policy is, you have to stick to your policy on using that plagiarism checker.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. So your methods and tools takeaways. We believe academic integrity begins with student enrollment. Your use of tools and methods does require an in-depth knowledge of your institutional needs. Everyone will be different, and there are many choices to choose from. Some of the tools are even free. So if you're new to this space, if you're trying to move into it and you don't want to make a huge commitment, I would encourage you to use your search functionality in your browser and find something that you can maybe test before you make a selection. Okay, training. Both faculty and students require training and instructions to use the academic integrity tools effectively, and emphasize both faculty and students. What I'm going to be sharing in the training section is hard learned after 6 years of managing significant online learning. Please do not ignore the need to train. So we'll start with training faculty. Faculty needs training year-round. Faculty rotate onto courses and off of courses, and maybe their teaching assignments change. So you have new faculty coming in because faculty have retired or left to move on to other positions. So obviously, if you're creating a new course, that's an opportunity for faculty training. At our institution, we also do a quality assessment process before the semester begins. That's an opportunity for us to train our faculty. Our educational technology team meets with our faculty before each semester. We provide them with one-on-one. They can call our educational technology team. We try to customize it to the faculty needs depending on which course they're teaching, because again, courses are run differently. The content demands that the courses are run differently. Our teaching assistants, our student teaching assistants, are also involved in the academic integrity and using our proctoring softwares, and so they're trained by our learning technologies team. And then all of the training materials are always available to our faculty and TAs within our learning management system. We have a dummy course set up that's a resource center so that those people who are used to sort of living in the learning management system can find what they need right there. We've obviously integrated academic integrity across the entire course development and production process. What do we train them on? We talk about how the tools integrate or don't integrate with the LMS. And this is something that actually has to be done, again, almost year-round, because just as the apps on your phone get updated and other software gets updated and you have to run the updates on your computer, all of these tools are constantly going updates and modifications. So we've recently had one of our tools that underwent a significant modification and had to be upgraded within the LMS, and so that requires us going back to the faculty and the TAs. We teach them how to set up the academic honesty tools. So what are the settings if you're doing a quiz or an exam and it's open book versus closed book? And then how do you review and interpret the results provided by the tools? How do you read a similarity ranking report from a plagiarism checker? If you have questions about the results, what do you do with that? So the faculty and the TAs need to understand how to review and interpret the results provided by the tools. For example, for our faculty, if the writing assessment is a self-reflection paper, we may expect a low similarity ranking. If the assignment is an annotated bibliography, one might expect a higher similarity ranking. But the faculty and the TAs have to understand, what does a similarity ranking mean, and then how do you check a similarity ranking if you have questions about it. Finally, the faculty need to know what to do if a student is non-compliant. Regardless of how many times you may have covered it in faculty meetings, it can never be enough. Of course, we also train our students. Students definitely need to be aware of the expectations and the potential consequences. We include academic honesty statements and our student conduct policy in the online orientation that all of our students go through. They have to indicate electronically that they have read the statement and policy and agree to conform to our policy while a student at our institution. I will say that this has been useful during several disciplinary actions. I recommend thinking through the instructions carefully. For example, we've learned the hard way to let students know that all proctoring videos are viewed by humans. This means you should notify your family members when you will be taking a test so they can be appropriately clothed. We also had one case where a student wanted to take quizzes without a shirt. So our instructions are now very clear about acceptable and non-acceptable dress for proctored assessments. We also include a lot of information in our first required course that all of our students take. So for example, they complete a plagiarism tutorial. We do not presume that the students know what plagiarism is. If they don't already know it, they have to learn it. So we educate our students. We also have our students complete online proctoring tutorial and practice assessments. This helps them become familiar with how the technology works on their computer prior to it being a high stakes either exam or assessment or paper, so they can feel comfortable with the proctoring technology. The following resources are provided in every online course. So if a student is taking an online course, we are going to provide them with guides and training materials. We call it our Module 0. We provide them with very specific instructions for reaching that 24/7, 365 technical support. So if you run into problems, how do you go get help? How do they report technical difficulties to our team? We place practice assessments that they can use as many times as they want to make sure that the technology is working for them. So many of these technologies require plugins, and if the plugin were to break, we don't want that to be while they're in a quiz or an exam that is high stakes. And we provide them with links to the plagiarism checking software so they can check their work before they turn in their papers. It's very important, we think, to do this in every single course because we've learned over time that students get new technology, new laptops, new computers in between the semesters and forget that plugins and other add-ins are not activated. So we found that prevention is better than trying to address it after the fact. We've also gone to great lengths to emphasize the technical support. If they're taking a quiz after business hours, we've tried to be very clear that their first line of defense is the tool vendor, not our learning technology team. We're not large enough to have 24/7 support. Often I might have a staff member who's online, but often I might not. So we want the students to know how to get help when they need it. We want them to have no surprises.
Dr. Fenton, so we have a question that came into the question pane, and I think this is really interesting. So the question is, it seems you recommend a lot of training for both student and faculty. Is the technology that difficult to actually learn?
I would say no, it's not that difficult to learn. However, people are already maybe a little stressed because they're turning in a paper, or they're taking a quiz, or they're taking a midterm or a final exam, and it's high stakes. And you want them to be comfortable with that foundational technology knowledge of the proctoring or the plagiarism checking software, so that that's one less thing for them to have to worry about. We just find it helps their comfort level. It helps them be less stressed in the online environment as they're trying to earn the different grades.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've taken a few proctored exams myself, and it's always stressful to feel like someone's looking at you while you're taking the exam. Have you encountered students giving any feedback around that?
Interestingly, so we are very open with them that this is a requirement of our accreditation. So if we did not have this proctoring, you would not be able to take these classes online. If you will, when I've had students actually come to my office to talk to me about it, life is all about trade-offs. They don't have to take the proctored exam, then that means they have to come to a campus class. So if they want to take the courses online in order to assure academic integrity, we have to use the proctoring. We don't have any choice. One of the things that we encourage them to look on it as is ensuring that they're completing a program that has a very high level of academic integrity, and they can be proud of that.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So our training takeaways are that faculty and TAs require training for grading and course setup. It's not a one-time event. It's going to be ongoing, and it will require some dedicated resources. And then also students require training on the use and especially how to access technical support, because you will have those students who, for whatever reasons, like I said, are doing those quizzes and exams in the wee hours, and they're going to need help. So just make sure they have technical support and they know how to access the technical support. Speaking of technical support, so you not only have to choose the right technology, but it does require technical support for your faculty, staff, and students. Our faculty technical support is primarily supplied by our learning technology staff. Again, we have instructional guides and examples that are provided to the faculty and the TAs when we orient them, when they're creating courses, when they're modifying courses, and when we meet with them when courses are being checked for quality before each semester. Our support staff, our learning technology staff, remain enrolled in online courses, so if they're needed. So they're not a student, they're a staff member, but when I teach in an online course and I look at everyone who's in my course, there's that staff member who I can contact through that course if I need to. We do have a ticketing system. There's a particular email that we encourage faculty to use whenever they need support from our learning technology staff. So they can access that 24/7, and we just sort of keep repeating that email address to them and telling them that's the best way to contact our team, because that way they don't have to remember necessarily who does what or even who's on vacation or anything like that. They can just send a ticket to our ticketing system. We know somebody will be looking at it the next business day, and we will address their issues. Our support team does provide timely responses to inquiries, even including overnight. I think our average response time is in the 4-hour range right now. And again, our TAs who are assigned to courses are trained, managed, and monitored. So trying to leave nothing to chance. For our student technical support, we again provide resources within the learning management system, so that online orientation course that I discussed is available to students until they graduate. So if they ever have a question about what about plagiarism, or I forgot what was in the academic integrity policy, it's in there. They can go back and look at it. And again, we put proctoring and plagiarism prevention tools for the students' use into every online course. Other student technical support, students can email our team to open a ticket and get a timely response, and that's the same email address that we send to that we have for the faculty. So students can use our ticketing system also. And all of our vendors, again, provide 24/7 support through online chat and phone for free. So we've built that into our contracts so that we don't have to pay to have staff members available 24/7. For technical support takeaways, really it's about incident resolution, training your users so they know where to get support 24/7. And we actually have it in an escalation grid for them that typically we encourage them to start with the vendor and then go to the in-house support ticketing system. And we usually recommend that the faculty be the last person that they talk to. We've messaged for years that you use the email that sends the tickets in order to get support. It just relieves stress from everyone. They don't have to remember who's on, who's off, and who's working. So even with those tools, you're going to have non-compliance. So how do you handle non-compliance? Students will test the limits and they'll engage in dishonest conduct. So let's talk a little bit about how we handle that. So what do we mean by non-compliant? Well, we consider a student non-compliant if they meet any of the conditions on this slide. For example, we have a faculty member who provides extremely detailed instructions for her quizzes and explicitly says the students cannot use any other electronic devices during her proctored assessment. Thus, when a student was recorded using their cell phone to record the content of the quiz, we undertook a disciplinary action. So students will read everything, they will sign that they've read everything, and they'll still take those actions that they said they knew were wrong. We count it as noncompliance if they violate our institutional policies or our school-wide policies or any of the pledges they've signed, or if they simply fail to follow instructions. It's most important, we think, to use our response to noncompliance as preventative and deterrence. So we want to address it in a timely, efficient, and effective way. It's important that faculty understand how important it is to use the tools. For us, often this means checking quizzes and exams when they close so that we can identify any issues of noncompliance right away and take steps to address them. What you don't want to happen is wait until the end of the semester and, oh, look, I've got 10 online quizzes, and oh, look, for all 10 of them, the student has not been following the instructions. That's not what you want. What you want is in quiz 1, you identify the problem, you address it with the student, and then it's dealt with for the rest of the semester. So we actually have non-compliance escalation, and that is where our faculty reports the incident to the learning technology team for secondary review. So in some of these instances, it is entirely possible that depending on how you interpret it, it could be non-compliance, it might not be non-compliance. So we've really learned that this stepwise approach is most beneficial for everyone. As an example of situations we had a student who was used to in-person classes and was apparently writing off to the side while taking a quiz. Obviously, we're recording her face and some movements, so we could not tell what she was doing. And what she was doing, we considered non-compliance. She also kept picking up pens and other tools. Again, things we don't expect to see in an online quiz because you don't need a pen, right? You're taking this on the computer. And especially in a multiple choice, keeping in mind that you could have an open book where you're allowing them to work to the side, which would be different. This was a closed book quiz. She was warned by the faculty member, but she didn't alter her behavior. So we went through the escalation, and ultimately it got to me. I conducted an investigation and I wound up meeting with the student, and I was actually able to show her the recording with the behaviors that were non-compliant. And we discussed how she could set herself up for success, removing all writing instruments, getting rid of excess paper, sort of having a clean space where she can take the quiz so that she wouldn't be tempted to pick things up or to write on a piece of paper. She ultimately signed the waiver agreeing to the disciplinary action, and the case was closed, and we never had another problem with her. So it's a matter of going through the steps and trying to work with the student along the way before you take significant action. So we have had several cases where we went all the way to a full-blown hearing for our non-compliance escalation, where it did go all the way to the hearing. I will say that having the electronic tools, either for the plagiarism checker or the recording of the quiz that was taken, has been very, very helpful. So even if you're doing this stepwise escalation, some people will push it as far as it absolutely can go. And we've been very pleased with the results of our using the proctoring tools in that way. So for noncompliance takeaways, misconduct can and will occur in the online environment. I think that's why all of our regional accreditors now require the proctoring of the assessments, as it was fairly widespread. And we believe in addressing the noncompliance early, so that I would say for 98% of our disciplinary misconduct or academic misconduct, we deal with it before it gets to a situation that requires a full-blown hearing and investigation. And that stepwise approach is very useful for that.
So Dr. Fenton, we have an interesting question here that arrived. And basically this person wants to know, why don't you take significant disciplinary action for each instance of academic misconduct?
We try to keep it proportional to the offense, if you will. So if it's a low-stake quiz and it was proctored and there was misconduct, so for example, the previous example where I was talking about the person when she was taking the quizzes and she was picking things up, those were fairly low-stake quizzes. And we want to help our students be successful, so we take that stepwise approach. We have had cases where the infraction was egregious, and we sort of leapfrogged some of that stepwise and went straight to very significant penalties, such as suspension or expulsion. I will say we've never had an appeal for a charge of plagiarism. And we've had 2 appeals using the proctoring software, both of which were upheld in our favor. So sometimes people just don't believe that you're going to prosecute, and they have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I had an instance where I took a proctored exam, and I have a tendency to put my hand over my face, like over my mouth. And it was one of those proctored exams where they could talk to you, and the guy on the other side was like, "Please remove your hand from your mouth." And I was like, "Oh, geez, like someone's actually like, I forgot someone was watching me." So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and for some of our faculty who teach some of our more foundational courses, they've reviewed more than 1,000 of these videos, right? So if somebody comes to you and they say that's a normal behavior, you can kind of look at them and go, no, because you've seen so many normal behaviors that haven't been flagged. And so, yeah, everyone is different, and we try to make as much allowance as we can for those differences. But at a certain point, you have to draw the line and you have to say, don't exhibit these behaviors anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. After that, I stopped putting my hand over my mouth.
Right, right. And what you're describing with that person on the other side is essentially our faculty sending the student a warning and saying, we've noticed this, please don't do this anymore. And if you stop doing it, then it ends there.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yep. I like it that you have personal experience with this.
Oh yeah, I think I have PTSD from some of the online proctoring.
So, lessons learned. Based on our experiences, we believe that our online academic integrity is on a par with face-to-face classes. We investigate and take action as needed, which I think helps a lot. We are very candid with the students that we do take action. We allow people to make small mistakes equivalent with consequences, and in 95% of the cases, this usually addresses many of the issues. When it's gone to full appeal all the way to our institutional president, the documentation provided by the online tools has helped us to make our case with little room for argument. So we believe it's beginning to end, that it begins with student enrollment and training. Obviously, the methods and tools that you choose are very important to making it work for everyone. The students will still exhibit academic misconduct sometimes, And enforcement of the policies is preventative for a majority of your students, for a vast majority of your students, because word does get around. The students talk. Even in the online environment, they have conversations that are offline out of the classes, and they communicate. So we strongly believe that academic integrity in the online environment is possible. Okay, thank you for your attention. Here is my contact information again. Please feel free to contact me via Twitter or the email you see here.
So thank you, Dr. Susan Fenton, for sharing your expertise with us. That was amazing. How do you think that went? I thought that was an amazing topic. How do you feel?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I feel pretty good about it. We, again, we believe it's very important. We think it speaks to the quality of our program that we use these tools and that we help our students understand what academic integrity means.
Yeah, I think it's important too. And having been an alumni of an online degree program, I completely can relate to this from a student perspective. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. And thank you everyone for your active participation through the questions pane. We really appreciate all of your questions and comments so far. As I mentioned earlier, we will be hosting more webinars on remote learning, and we are also hosting office hours to answer any further questions you may have. You can find information for the webinar series and office hours on our webpage found on the screen and in chat. Also, a link to the recording of this webinar and a certificate will be sent to you via email within 24 hours. Lastly, you will see a survey pop up when you close the webinar, but don't leave us just yet. But be sure to provide your feedback on the survey so we can continue to improve these webinars. Now we will continue to answer your questions through the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel until the top of the hour. So keep those questions coming.
James has a question about how many people are on our learning technologies team. So James, to put it into perspective, at our graduate school, we currently have about 330 graduate students, post-baccalaureate certificate, master's degree, and 2 different doctoral degrees. And we have 4 people on our learning technologies team. One of whom has a master's degree in instructional design. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Yeah, so it looks like Chenda has an, did I say her name wrong? Chenda. So asking for examples for method and tools for ensuring academic integrity. Do you have any of your favorites or most effective? Favorites might be not the right thing.
So we obviously use one of the cloud-based AI recording methods because I talked about our faculty watching the recordings, and that's our selected one because it doesn't require the students to schedule when to take the exam to have a person on the other side. I think where you need to start is with a needs assessment for your program or your department or your school, which is what we did. We said, what do we need? And then we went out and we found the best one. Again, the methods will depend on what you already have available to you. For example, what is your learning management system? What are the plugins or the add-ons that work with your learning management system? So that's something that we definitely took into account.
Okay, so that's good. So we have someone, this is more of a comment. So it's from Susan Foster. She says, I appreciate the topic. There are many academic leaders who do not or will not support this. What's your take on that?
I would find that surprising. When I have had faculty question it, so I've not had it as much from leadership as I've had faculty question, why are we doing it and why are we doing it the way we're doing it? And essentially it boils down to the reputation and the academic integrity of your programs. Do you want to be, and we all know they're out there and they get talked about like that, right, as diploma mills or you know, anybody can get a degree from them, right? Oh, it's easy, you don't have to worry about it. And I don't think that that's, at least for me, that's not where I want to be. That's not the kind of program I want to be associated with. I'm also thinking about our employers who are employing our people, right? So when they go out into to get a job and they say they came out of my program, if I purported to teach them something, I want them to be able to do that. I want them to be able to know whatever it is we said they would know, or to be able to do whatever we said they would be able to do. So I really look on it from those aspects, as well as just meeting the accreditation requirements.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. So we have a question from JD Mosley. So this is interesting. So because we only had 3 weeks before our final exams when we had to switch to all classes online. As a result, there was evidence of blatant cheating on final exams. Should standard policies be used, or is this special case given rise to special enforcement?
Yeah, JD, I think from that instance, you know, we even in our online environment said if we have students who are reporting problems completing their work for the semester, we'll allow more than we might normally have, that kind of thing. I would say for this semester, it might be a special enforcement-ish, you know, I might look at special enforcement. What I would also be looking to do is to say, okay, from a disaster preparedness aspect, what if it's the same way for the summer? What if it's the same way for the fall? So we don't, you know, some universities are already announcing they're going to be online for the fall. How are you going to address this? So it's not just for what's happening right now, but how are you going to address it in an ongoing fashion, and to be prepared for that?
Yeah, I think the rapid change is causing a lot of educators to have to address issues they probably didn't have to address before, especially virtually, right? That becomes tricky. So
Right.
Lucia has a question about online proctoring. This is, so she has many questions. So I will try to break it down.
I,
So
I,
how does it, you
I
saw
see
it?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So how
see
does it
it. So,
work? Okay.
yeah, so Lucia, on our website, and when students are admitted into our program, so this is for all students, not just our online students, we have technology requirements. And so when they go through the orientation, you know, a month or two before they're even starting the program, they're walked through our technology requirements. And we explicitly say things like, we're not responsible for your work firewall. Okay, so if you're trying to do your quizzes while you're at work and the proctoring software won't work, that's not our issue. Okay, we've learned already. So we're very, again, we're very upfront with them. We're very explicit about, here's the minimum technological requirements you're going to need for a computer. You're going to need, you know, a webcam. Here's what we recommend. It works best if you do this, you know, so just laying all of that out for them. For the reviewing, it's actually interesting for our recorded solution that we use, where it records them. Again, it integrates with our learning management system, and what it does is it prioritizes them from, you know, the most suspect down to the least suspect. So you're right, manually reviewing each video would be time consuming. If we had 100 students in a class, we'd have a 20-hour-a-week TA, and that reviewing would start with the TA. It would start with the teaching assistant. And then also with that, when you go on the video, it actually flags where it detected you know, non-compliant behavior. So if you have a totally locked down quiz and they're looking off to the side, the AI, the artificial intelligence, puts a red flag at that point in the video. So you do not have to watch each, 30-minute video or hour-long video or whatever. And so we've gotten pretty good at reviewing those in a efficient manner.
Okay, great. So there's something about document retention for documentation of
So
proctoring. Like, how long do you have to retain it?
yeah, so we're state of Texas, and so we have to maintain for 7 years.
Okay.
So
Oh,
I
really?
would say look
So
at
like,
your institutional, yeah, look to your institutional policies.
so as long as you have to retain like your taxes, right? Your tax documentation.
Yeah, yeah. But again, some states may say 10 years or something else.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you see any questions, additional questions? There's a bunch of questions. I think we just need to sift through some of
Yeah,
these.
so Samita said, what if there are no definite institutional policies? And Samita, so when I was talking about our graded assessments and 1,000 words, those are school policies. Those are not institutional policies. So I would say you can develop your own policies. Again, remember, we say if the faculty member told them, they have to comply with it. Academic integrity, if you're focused on skill development, I'm presuming so is the academic integrity required for online courses focusing on skill development rather than on getting a certificate or degree? We consider that professional development, and if the person is trying to claim some sort of continuing education credit, we would use the academic integrity tools, yes. The next question, are the policies helpful only in an online environment? I would say absolutely not. Again, as I mentioned with plagiarism, right? That happens in the face-to-face environment when people turn in papers. So, I would say you could use these in any environment. You just have to determine what your needs are. Another question, does the software provide a log of keystrokes and screen actions of the students while they are taking the test? Yes, if you set it up that way.
So this is interesting. So I have a daughter who is, she's a junior in college right now, and she was writing a paper yesterday. She sent it to me to review it for her. And we had this whole discussion about plagiarism. And she's like, Mom, what tools can I use? Because I want to make sure that, I'm not plagiarizing my work. It's all my original work. I think students have that anxiety also. They want to make sure that they're staying within guidelines. So do you have advice for educators that they can share with their students?
So I would say, just like we do for our students, so if you have a tool that you're using, try to make sure that the tool is flexible enough to provide the students with practice examples in your course. So I have students who have a paper due today, actually, at midnight, by midnight tonight, and it will go through a plagiarism checker, and that plagiarism checker is available in the course for them to run their paper through it as many times as they want to. We don't save those tries, we just allow them to continue to run it as much as they want to check it so that they can see the results. That would be my primary advice, is to help them figure out how to make the technology work for them.
Yeah, and that was kind of the same advice I gave her. I was like, figure it out.
Yeah.
No, I actually helped her kind of figure it out. But it's interesting because students, I think, especially now with the changes, this rapid change to online, I think students are trying to figure out what tools can they use to ensure that they are compliant also, because, I think students are also very mindful of that. What's been your experience so far?
I'm sorry, I was spaced out.
Oh, no, I'm saying like, because I know that a lot of your courses are online, like this rapid change to like
Hmm.
online for a lot of students has been like jarring, right? What's been your
Yes.
experience with your students?
So for our students, because so many of our classes are already online, um, it really wasn't that big of a transition. So it was pretty smooth for us. We have had other schools in our university where it was more difficult, both for the faculty and the students. I think one of the takeaways that I learned from from our other schools in our institution was that the faculty can really set the tone, right? So yes, this is new. Yes, this is going to be different, but we're going to work through it together, and we're going to, together we're going to figure out how to make this work. I think it's incumbent upon faculty to introduce that tenor of being um, calm about it, and always tell students. So within the last year, I had to create a whole new course, and what I told the students is, you're not going to be penalized for anything that I know is not your fault, right? And even as every 2 weeks or so, as the course was moving along, how is it going? What needs to be changed? Doing formative assessments, making sure that the students were learning and were getting something out of it, rather than just waiting until the end for everybody to say, that didn't really work for me. So regular check-ins and, assuring them that should new technology that no one's used to fails, they're not going to be held responsible for that.
Yeah, I think that's important to kind of ease some of the stress on your students too, right? Because I think this rapid move to online for a lot of students is it's interesting for them to have to navigate if they haven't been already navigating it, right? Like some of your students are already used to this. So thank you for
Right.
that information. Sorry about that. So that brings
You're
us to
wel
the
you're welcome.
so that brings our webinar to a close. I just want to remind everyone, please complete the survey that will pop up on your screen when the webinar ends. This will help us, stay the course and improve our webinars based on your feedback. Please be sure to check back on the website for upcoming webinars and for our office hours. Also, we have a lot of resources for you. Share this with your colleagues. And thank you for your participation. And Susan, thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure.
All right, everyone. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for joining us. Happy Monday.